The package arrived on a Thursday, 3 days after Major Elizabeth Beth Garrison's 50th birthday, and 2 weeks before someone tried to kill her. It was small, unmarked, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. The postmark said Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg. Beth stared at it across her kitchen table like it was a live grenade. In her 17 years as an Army flight nurse, she'd learned to trust her instincts about danger, and everything about this package screamed danger. She'd been retired for exactly 1 year. 1 year of trying to sleep without nightmares. 1 year of avoiding the news whenever they mentioned Afghanistan. 1 year of pretending the last medevac flight she'd worked hadn't changed her in ways she couldn't explain to her therapist, her ex-husband, or the daughter who'd stopped returning her calls. Beth picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. She should call someone, the police, the FBI. But what would she tell them? That she'd received a package and had a bad feeling. They'd laugh. They'd tell her she was paranoid, that retirement was making her jumpy, that not every box was a threat. But they hadn't been on that flight. They hadn't seen what she'd seen. Her hands were steady as she cut through the tapes. 17 years of combat medicine had trained the shake out of her fingers. Inside was a single item wrapped in tissue paper. When she unfolded it, her breath caught. A Bronze Star medal, not hers. The name engraved on the back, CPT James R. Mitchell, U.S. Army. Beth's vision blurred. The kitchen tilted. She gripped the table edge to keep from falling. Captain Mitchell. The medal was accompanied by a note, handwritten on lined paper, torn from a spiral notebook. Major Garrison, you probably thought we'd all forgotten. You probably thought 16 months was long enough. You probably sleep just fine at night. We don't. One of us is coming for answers, and if you won't give them willingly, we'll take them another way. You know what you did. The note wasn't signed. Beth read it 3 times. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The medal sat on her table like an accusation, its ribbons still crisp and clean, like someone had kept it preserved, like someone had been waiting for exactly the right moment to return it. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number she'd sworn she'd never call again. It rang 4 times. Then, Colonel Harrison's office. This is Major Elizabeth Garrison. I need to speak with the Colonel. Now. I'm sorry, Major, but Colonel Harrison is in a meeting. Tell him it's about Flight 227. Tell him someone knows. Beth's voice cracked. Tell him they sent me Mitchell's medal. The line went silent for 3 seconds. That felt like 3 years. Hold, please. 60 seconds later, a man's voice, older and harder than Beth remembered. Beth, Jesus Christ, where are you? My house, sir. Someone sent me. I know what they sent you. We all got one. Colonel Harrison's voice was tight. Mitchell's team. They're reaching out to everyone who was on that flight. Beth, you need to listen to me very carefully. Do not respond to any contact. Do not talk to anyone about what happened. Do not. Who's doing this? Who knows? We're trying to find out. But until we do, you're not safe. None of us are. He paused. How much do you remember about that night? Everything. Beth wanted to scream. I remember everything. But what came out was enough. That's the problem, Harrison said quietly. We all remember enough, but nobody remembers the same thing. The C-130 Hercules shuddered through turbulence at 23,000 feet. Beth had flown this route Bagram to Landstuhl more times than she could count. Emergency medevac flights, ferrying the wounded from Afghanistan to the massive U.S. military hospital in Germany. Shattered bodies, traumatic amputations, burns that made grown men weep. This flight should have been routine. Flight 227, crew of 623 patients, 12 critical, 11 stable, standard load, standard route. But something had gone wrong from the moment they'd loaded the patients. The first sign was Captain Mitchell. He'd been the last patient loaded, stretchered in by medics who wouldn't make eye contact. Special operations, Beth had been told. Classified mission, don't ask questions. His injuries were severe but not immediately. Life-threatening shrapnel wounds, fractured ribs, possible internal bleeding. He was sedated, stable, hooked up to monitors. But when Beth had checked his chart, something had made her pause. The name was right, James R. Mitchell, 03 Special Forces. But the birth date was wrong. She'd flown Mitchell out of Kandahar 2 years ago. Different injuries, same guy. She'd remembered him because he'd joked about taking the frequent flyer route home. She'd remembered his face. This wasn't the same man. The face was different. The build was different. This Captain Mitchell was younger, heavier, with a scar on his left temple that the original Mitchell hadn't had. Beth had flagged it immediately. Protocol demanded verification. But then Colonel Harrison had pulled her aside. He was the ranking medical officer on the flight, overseeing the entire operation. "Major Garrison, I need you to let this one go." "Sir, that's not Captain Mitchell. The file doesn't match the I know." Harrison's eyes had been hard, unreadable. "And I'm telling you to let it go. This is above your clearance level. Above mine, frankly. That patient is classified. You treat his wounds, you maintain his vitals, and you don't ask questions. Are we clear?" Beth should have pushed back, should have insisted. But Harrison was her superior officer, and she'd been trained to follow orders, so she'd let it go. 20 minutes into the flight, patient 14, the real designation for Mitchell, started seizing. Not medical seizing, something else. His eyes had snapped open, his restraints held, but barely, and he'd started talking, babbling, words that didn't make sense, sentences that ran together in languages Beth couldn't identify. The other patients had started reacting, the conscious ones, the ones who could see patient 14. They'd begun panicking, shouting. One had tried to pull his fore out. Another had screamed something about the compound, and they're all dead. Beth and her team had moved to sedate patient 14 further, but Harrison had stopped them. "Let him talk," Harrison had ordered. "Sir, he's destabilizing the other patients." I said let him talk. So they'd listened, and what patient 14 had said, in those 6 terrible minutes before they'd sedated him into silence, had changed everything. He'd talked about a mission that didn't exist, about a compound in Pakistan, not Afghanistan, where something had happened, something involving civilians, children. He'd talked about orders that came from levels above God, and men who'd cleaned up the mess, and how Mitchell was already dead before we even landed. Then he'd looked directly at Beth with eyes that were too aware, too sharp, and said, "You're all witnesses now, and witnesses don't get to retire." They'd sedated him then. Harrison had ordered it, and Beth had pushed the drugs herself, grateful for the silence. Patient 14 had died 3 hours later, multiple organ failure, the autopsy would say, complications from his initial injuries, nothing suspicious, nothing that couldn't be explained. But Beth had been the one monitoring him when his vitals crashed. She'd been the one who saw the look in Harrison's eyes when he'd called time of death. She'd been the one who'd noticed that patient 14's restraints had been loosened just enough, and his the fourth had been adjusted just so, and the drug dosage on his chart didn't quite match what she remembered administering. She'd said nothing. The other patients on that flight had been debriefed extensively when they'd landed in Germany. Long, intensive sessions with people who weren't doctors, people who asked very specific questions about what they'd seen, what they'd heard, what they remembered. Beth had been debriefed too, told that patient 14's ravings were the result of head trauma and sedation, told that classified missions sometimes involved misinformation, told that her service to her country meant keeping certain secrets. She'd accepted a commendation, a promotion to major, an early retirement package that was far too generous, and she'd tried very, very hard to forget. Beth sat in her kitchen, staring at Mitchell's bronze star, and realized she'd been naive, because the patients on flight 227 hadn't forgotten, and apparently they'd decided 16 months was long enough to stay quiet. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then, hello, heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice, male, rough with anger, and something that sounded like fear. "Major Garrison, who is this?" "Staff Sergeant Luis Reyes. I was on your flight, patient number 7. A pause. "I got Mitchell's dog tags yesterday, and last night, someone broke into my house while I was sleeping. Didn't take anything. Just left a message on my bathroom mirror. Remember, flight 227. Beth's blood ran cold. "Are you okay? Did you call the police?" "I called everyone who was on that flight, the ones I could track down. Anyway," Reyes's voice dropped. "Major, 6 of them are dead." The room spun. "What? 6 patients from flight 227, dead in the last 6 months. Car accidents, suicides, 1 home invasion gone wrong, 1 drowned in his bathtub." Reyes was talking faster now. "I didn't think anything of it until I started putting it together, until I realized they'd all been talking, trying to figure out what we actually saw that day, trying to piece together who patient 14 really was and what the hell happened on that flight. Reyes, you need to stop. You need to. They're killing us." Major, someone is killing everyone who was on flight 227, and you were the flight nurse. You were with patient 14 when he died. You know something." "I don't know anything," Beth lied. "Bullshit." Reyes's voice cracked. "Mitchell talked to you before he died. I saw it. We all saw it. He said something to you, and then 20 minutes later he was dead. What did he tell you?" Beth closed her eyes. She could still see patient 14's face, could still hear his words, whispered so quietly that only she could hear them. In those final moments before his vitals crashed, "Tell them we failed. Tell them the mission was compromised. Tell them Harrison knew." "He didn't tell me anything," Beth said. "Then why are they sending us his medals? Why are they leaving messages? Why are people dying?" Reyes was shouting now. "Major, please. I have a daughter. I have." The line went dead. Beth tried calling back, straight to voicemail. She sat in her kitchen, alone, with a dead man's medal and too many questions. She thought about calling Harrison back, thought about calling the police, thought about running. But where would she go? If Reyes was right, if someone was systematically eliminating everyone who'd been on flight 227, then nowhere was safe. Her phone buzzed. Text message. "Unknown number. Patient 14 didn't die from his injuries. You know that. We know that. Time to tell the truth, Major, or join the others." Attached was a photo. Staff Sergeant Luis Reyes, slumped in his car, eyes open and empty. Dead. The timestamp on the photo was 3 minutes ago. Beth's hands shook as she dialed 911, then stopped, then dialed again, then stopped again. If she called the police, she'd have to explain. She'd have to tell them about Flight 227, about Patient 14, about the things she'd been ordered to forget. And if someone was powerful enough to murder 7 people and make it look like accidents, they were powerful enough to make her look crazy, or worse, make her look complicit. Instead, she called the one person who might still have answers. Colonel Harrison answered on the first ring. "Beth, don't say anything. Don't use names. Are you somewhere safe? Reyes just called me. He's dead now." Beth's voice was surprisingly steady. "He said 6 others are dead too. He said someone's killing everyone from the flight." Silence on the other end. Then, Reyes was paranoid. He'd been making accusations, bothering people. His death was, "I got a photo of his body 3 minutes ago." Beth interrupted. "Whoever sent it knows I'm involved. They know what I saw. And they know you gave the orders." More silence. When Harrison spoke again, his voice had changed, harder, colder. "What exactly did Patient 14 tell you before he died?" "He said the mission was compromised. He said you knew. That's all." Beth hesitated. Patient 14 had said more, much more. He'd told her a name, a code name, a location. He'd told her where to find proof. But Beth had spent 16 months trying to forget those words, trying to convince herself they didn't matter. "That's all," she lied. "Good," Harrison exhaled. "Beth, listen to me carefully. The situation is being handled. Patient 14 was a contractor working a black op that went sideways. What he said on that flight was disinformation meant to cover the real mission. The patients who've died, tragic coincidences, mostly mental health related. PTSD is a hell of a thing. 7 people, Colonel, 7 people in 6 months. War takes its toll in different ways." Harrison said smoothly. "Now, I need you to destroy whatever was sent to you. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't go to the media. And for God's sake, don't try to investigate. Just sit tight. This will blow over. And if it doesn't, it will." His voice dropped. "Because the alternative is that everyone on Flight 227 ends up like Reyes. And I don't think you want that on your conscience." The line went dead. Beth stared at her phone. That hadn't been a warning. It had been a threat. Harrison wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to silence her. She grabbed her laptop and opened an encrypted browser. If 7 patients were dead, there had to be records, death certificates, news articles, something. She started with the easy ones, the names Reyes had mentioned during their brief call. Within 20 minutes, she'd found them. Private Marcus Webb, car accident, 4 months ago. Single vehicle collision, no witnesses. Specialist Jennifer Kowalski, suicide by overdose, 3 months ago. History of depression. Sergeant First Class David Chen, home invasion, 2 months ago. Killed during a burglary where nothing was stolen. Corporal Ahmed Hassan, drowned in his bathtub, 6 weeks ago. Ruled accidental. Private First Class Sarah Thompson, fell downstairs, 4 weeks ago. Severe head trauma. Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, gas leak in his apartment, 3 weeks ago. Died in his sleep. And now Reyes made 7. Every single one had been a patient on flight 227. Every single one had been conscious enough to hear patient 14's confession. And every single death had been ruled an accident or suicide. Beth's stomach churned. This wasn't coincidence. This was a systematic cleanup operation. Someone was erasing witnesses. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You have 48 hours to come forward with the truth. Tell the world what happened on flight 227. Tell them about patient 14. Tell them about Harrison, or your next. Then a second message. We're watching you right now, Major. Wave hello. Beth's blood turned to ice. She slowly stood and walked to her kitchen window. Across the street, a dark sedan was parked at the curb. Tinted windows, no plates visible. Someone was in that car. Watching her house. Her military training kicked in. Assess, adapt, survive. She couldn't go to the police. Whoever was behind this had enough power to kill 7 people and make it look natural. She couldn't trust Harrison. He was either complicit or compromised. She couldn't run. They were watching her. That left one option. Patient 14 had told her where to find proof. A name and a location. She'd tried to forget it, but the words had burned themselves into her memory like a brand. Bishop, Fort Meade, server room 7C. Everything's there. Everything they don't want you to know. Fort Meade, home of the National Security Agency, one of the most secure military installations in the country. Beth had 48 hours, maybe less. She grabbed her keys, her laptop, and the Bronze Star medal. Then she walked out her front door, got in her car, and drove straight toward the dark sedan. As she passed it, she saw the driver clearly for just a moment. Young, military haircut, earpiece, not law enforcement, not a civilian. Military intelligence. Beth kept driving. The sedan followed at a distance, professional, patient, waiting for her to make a mistake. She drove to a shopping mall, parked in the crowded lot, and disappeared into the crowd. Lost the tail in a department store, slipped out a back exit, and caught an Uber to a rental car place 3 miles away. By midnight, she was on I-95 North, driving a rented Toyota toward Maryland with a fake ID she'd kept from her days running classified supply chains in Iraq. By dawn, she was in a motel outside Fort Meade, planning how to break into one of the most secure facilities in the world. Beth had never been good at breaking rules. 17 years in the military had trained the rebellion out of her, but 17 years had also taught her how military installations worked. The routines, the gaps, the human element that no security system could eliminate. She couldn't get on to Fort Meade as herself. Her credentials would be flagged instantly, but she'd kept her old uniform, and she'd kept the access badge from her last assignment at Walter Reed, which used the same security system as most military installations. The badge was expired, but the chip was still active, and if she timed it right, during the shift change when security was distracted and systems were updating, she might just slip through. At 0630 hours, dressed in her service uniform with her hair pulled back and her face showing none of the fear that churned in her gut, Beth approached the Fort Meade gate with a stack of files and a coffee in hand. Looking every inch the harried officer running late for a morning briefing, the guard barely glanced at her badge. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning," Beth said, her voice carrying the easy authority of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She was in. Finding Building 7 took 20 minutes of navigating the massive installation. Finding Server Room 7C took another 10 minutes of bluffing her way past 2 different security checkpoints with a clipboard and an attitude that said she belonged there. The room itself was locked with a keypad. Beth stood outside it, her heart hammering, knowing she had maybe 60 seconds before someone noticed an unscheduled access attempt. Then the door opened from the inside. A young sergeant stepped out, his arms full of equipment, struggling to keep the door propped while he maneuvered. He saw Beth's uniform and rank. "Ma'am, could you hold the door?" Beth grabbed it. "No problem, Sergeant." He thanked her and walked away. The door clicked shut behind her. Inside, the server room hummed with the white noise of 1,000 machines processing 1,000 secrets. Beth moved quickly, scanning the server designations until she found what patient 14 had described. Server 7C14. Bishop. Classification. She plugged in a thumb drive she'd bought at a gas station and started copying files. Gigabytes of data, mission reports, operational records, names and dates and places that shouldn't exist in any official database. And photos. God, the photos, a compound in Pakistan, bodies, small bodies, children, and a mission report signed by Colonel Trevor Harrison, authorizing necessary force to eliminate a high-value target despite civilian presence in the target zone. The mission had been a massacre, and Patient 14, whose real name was James Mitchell, contractor for a black ops unit that didn't officially exist, had been the whistleblower. He'd tried to report it through proper channels, and when that failed, he'd tried to escape with evidence. They'd hunted him, shot him, made it look like combat injuries, and loaded him onto Flight 227 to get him out of the country before anyone could ask questions. But Mitchell had lived long enough to talk, and now everyone who'd heard him was dying. Beth's thumb drive finished copying. She ejected it and turned to leave. Colonel Harrison was standing in the doorway. Beth, his voice was tired, sad. "I really wish you'd listened to me." Beth's hand moved to her pocket, where she'd hidden the only weapon she had, a pocket knife. Useless against a trained officer, but better than nothing. "It's over, Colonel. I have everything. The mission files, the photos, Mitchell's testimony. It's all going public." "No," Harrison said quietly. "It's not." He pulled a sidearm from his jacket, standard issue Beretta M9, pointed it at her chest. "I didn't want this," he said. "You were a good nurse, Beth. One of the best, but you were also a witness. And this is bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than Mitchell and his misguided conscience. You killed children," Beth whispered. "I followed orders to eliminate a target that had killed hundreds of our soldiers. The children were collateral damage, unfortunate but necessary." Harrison's face was stone, and Mitchell was a contractor who couldn't handle the realities of war. He threatened to expose a classified operation that keeps this country safe. So yes, we silenced him. And yes, we've been silencing everyone who might corroborate his story. He killed 7 people. 7 people who posed a national security risk. Harrison shook his head. "This is how the world works, Beth. This is how it's always worked. The strong make hard choices, and people like you get to sleep safely at night because of it." "I won't sleep safely ever again," Beth said. "No," Harrison agreed. "You won't?" He fired. Beth felt the impact before she heard the sound. Her chest exploded in pain. She fell backward, her head cracking against a server rack. The room spun. Harrison stood over her, looking almost regretful. "I'll make it quick. You were a good soldier." Beth's hand closed around the thumb drive in her pocket. She'd failed. The truth would die with her, just like it had died with Mitchell and Reyes and all the others. Harrison raised his weapon for the final shot. Then the door burst open. Federal agents in tactical gear flooded the room. FBI, Homeland Security, people in suits with badges and guns and authority that even Harrison couldn't ignore. "Colonel Trevor Harrison, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice." Harrison's gun clattered to the floor. His face went white. How one of the agents helped Beth to her feet. She wasn't shot. Harrison had missed. Or had he? Beth looked down. Her uniform had a hole in it, but no blood. The impact had been a rubber bullet. He'd been trying to subdue her, not kill her. "Why?" The agent spoke quietly. "Major Garrison, you're under arrest as well." Beth's world tilted. "What? You illegally accessed classified materials. You broke into a secure facility. You stole government property." The agent gestured to the thumb drive still clutched in her hand. "You're a traitor, Major, just like the rest of them." And suddenly, horribly, Beth understood. This had never been about covering up Mitchell's death. It had been about flushing out leakers, about identifying everyone who knew about the mission, about creating a situation where witnesses would panic and break protocol and reveal themselves. The deaths hadn't been murders. They'd been staged. The patients were in witness protection, being disappeared one by one to see who would break, who would run, who would try to expose the truth. Beth had been the target all along, the last holdout, the one they needed to break, and she'd walked right into the trap. Harrison was being led away in handcuffs, not as a criminal, but as part of the operation. He'd played his role perfectly. The threatening texts, the surveillance, the gun in the server room, all of it designed to force Beth into exactly this moment. "You used me," Beth whispered. The agent almost smiled. "We protected national security. There's a difference." As they led her away in handcuffs, past the servers humming with their terrible secrets, Beth finally understood what patient 14 had really been trying to tell her. You're all witnesses now, and witnesses don't get to retire. He hadn't been warning her about external threats. He'd been warning her about the system itself, the machine that protected its secrets at any cost, the institution that demanded absolute loyalty and punished anyone who asked questions. Beth had spent 17 years serving that system, and in the end, it had turned her into exactly what it needed her to be. Not a hero, not a whistleblower, a cautionary tale. The military tribunal found Major Elizabeth Garrison guilty of unauthorized disclosure of classified information, illegal access to secure systems, and theft of government property, sentenced to 12 years at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Colonel Harrison received a commendation for his role in identifying and apprehending a security threat. He retired with full honors 6 weeks later. The 7 patients from Flight 227 remained in undisclosed locations, their deaths never officially corrected. Patient 14's real name, mission details, and the truth about what happened in that compound in Pakistan remained classified at the highest levels. And sometimes, late at night in her cell, Beth wondered if Mitchell had known how it would end, if he'd known that telling the truth wouldn't set anyone free. It would just make them targets. She wondered if he'd told her anyway, hoping that someday, somehow, someone would be brave enough or foolish enough to try. She wondered if that made him a hero or a fool. In the end, she decided it didn't matter, because the system had won, the way it always won. And Beth Garrison, who'd spent 17 years saving lives, would spend the next 12 years paying for asking the wrong questions.